I'm Keith Grachow, co-creator of Dead to Us, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Keith Grachow about his comic book projects and workshops, plus Toronto Comicon 2024. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Toronto Comicon is a spectacular 3-day sci-fi, horror, anime, gaming, and comic book event in Canada that attracts thousands of people to come to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Keith Grachow is a comic book author, illustrator, graphic designer, and instructor who teaches workshops on illustration. He's written for SCI by AH Comics, co-written his story in Cauldron, authored his own comics, Yost the Golem, Bounty Hunter Kai, and co-created many comic books and anthology series. Strange Case with Mark Bertolini for Scout Comics, Checkmate Blues with Robert Evaniak, and Toronto Comics anthology Three Snowblind with Howard Wong, and children's books with his mother, Amy, for the Up in the Sky series. He's also worked in animation as a digital ink and paint artist for the Disney movies Winnie the Pooh and Princess and the Frog, and designed toy packages for products like Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Currently, Keith is co-authoring and illustrating the graphic novel Summer on the Swing with his mother, Amy Grachow. The semi-autobiographical comic tells the story of her upbringing in a bungalow colony in upstate New York in the 1960s. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Keith Grachow about his comic book projects and workshops, plus Toronto Comicon 2024. So, Keith Grachow, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me, John.
I appreciate your time. I know you're very busy. I'm looking at your schedule, and you've got conventions and all sorts of stuff going on. But before I get to all the questions, I like to ask you, what are you reading today? What's on your bedside reading table?
I'm rereading a bunch of my comic books. I've got all these comics that I've collected over the years. And recently, I have wanted to fill in some of those runs. So I've just decided to reread some of the comics that I already have like full runs on, and then by the time hopefully I'm done with those runs, I'll fill in the other runs. So currently I'm rereading Ultimate Spider-Man, the original series. I'm reading Dark Horse's Conan with Kurt Busiek and Carrie Nord, which is one of my favorites. And actually, for the first time, I'm reading, I think it's called like The Last Dragon. I may be misstating the title, but it was created by Carl Potts, who I just met at a convention I was at in January.
Oh,
and he
wow.
was so kind to give me this beautiful graphic novel he created back in the 80s. And so I've been reading that as well.
Nice. That's all good stuff for sure, for sure. So, as I said, we're talking here today because you're going to be tabling at Toronto Comicon 2024. So, with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, what is it you like most about going to conventions?
I think I've said this before. Basically, I just really enjoy the comic book community. Just like being part of it, being a creator, showing, what I'm doing to people that come by. So all the comic book creation that I'm making, seeing what other creators are making, interacting with them, having conversations about process or just life, getting to know new people. It's all encompassing being
Sure.
part of this community. And we are going to talk about this. And I'm also taking on the role of teacher or mentor to some of these younger up and coming creators. I've been doing workshops and things like that. And hopefully I'll do something at Toronto Comicon. Nothing's concrete yet, but I'd like to be able to do that there if possible. But if not, just even meeting some young creator and seeing what they're up to, and if they want any information I can help give them that I've gotten on my own.
Sure, that's pretty encouraging when folks come up or younger folks, let's say, and they're eager to get into expressing themselves through comic books. I think that's a really encouraging sign.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do teach these workshops, and a majority of them are young people, are filled with young people who are just so enthusiastic for comic books and creating them, and they have so many great ideas. As a matter of fact, I tutor a couple of young people, and that's what we do is we create comics. Some of the ideas they come up with, it just boggles me that they come up with some things that I never think of in a million years, which is the really exciting part.
That's neat. That's good stuff. Now, you've been to a lot of conventions and festivals. In fact, we've met at many of them. But I'm wondering, is there any special moment that stands out to you? Maybe someone you met or someone you were eager to share something with? Any memories like that?
I mean, I've got a lot. It's hard for me to pinpoint some of the amazing things that have happened to me. I mean, I can say that off the top of my head, one of the great experiences I've had is being able to table with my family. My mother and I have co-created several children's books, and we're currently working on a graphic novel together. And we've been able to table at various shows throughout states in Canada. So, and my mom is more seasoned now, but when she first started doing this, it was a very new experience for her. And so seeing the awe on her face when an amazing cosplayer would walk by in this intricate costume, and she'd be like, I can't believe how much time and effort they put into creating this kind of stuff, or talking to she'd interact with fellow creators. And so that was really exciting for me because, as you mentioned, I do this quite often, and I do try to remember how lucky I am and how grateful I am to be part of this community. But sometimes it can be a bit tiring, and being around people that are fresh and excited to be there invigorates me. And so that's one of the things I look forward to is being able to, whether it's my sister recently tabled with me at a show in New Orleans, and she was so excited, and she had no idea what to expect. She's like, I can't believe this is what you do. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. And so it was really cool to see it through her eyes. And so that's one of the things I look forward to when I meet people, is seeing that fresh excitement that sometimes you forget about as you've been doing this for decades.
Yeah, no, that's very memorable. Great experiences there for sure, for sure. So you're going to be tabling there at Toronto Comicon. I'm wondering what you'll have on your table. What do you think attendees will be able to see when they come by?
So I just wanted to make sure I had the table information up. That's what I was doing prior to the conversation we started. So I'm going to be in the guest section, table P112, next to Howard Wong, who's at table P110. And the two of us are bringing back a revigorated version of a comic book story we had in the Toronto Comics Anthology Volume 3 about 7 or 8 years ago. And we had always planned on doing something with this comic book story. In fact, when we were originally doing it, I was planning for a color version of it because the Toronto Comics Volume 3 was in black and white, or like a gray value at that time. And I had always planned on releasing this at some point. And so it just so happens that because Howard and I are doing workshops together, and we have other comic book stories that we're collaborating on, that we were like, well, what is something we can have now to present at this next show? And I'm like, well, we have this comic story that we can just, it's already colored. We just have to go back in, make sure everything made sense. Howard relettered it, so there's new dialogue. It's a really great story. And we added some process to it, some process pages into it. So it's a nice comic book that people can appreciate. If they've read the original story, it's going to be fresh and new. I think since Howard and I are sitting together, we'll be able to get people to, if they want to get both of us to sign, it'll be a great event for them.
Sure. Well, what's the name of that so people can identify it when they come by your table?
Dead to Us, and it's called Dead to Us. Originally, it was called Snowblind in the Toronto Comics, but we wanted to do more stories, so we figured an overarching title would be appropriate. So it's called Dead to Us. It's a new cover nobody's ever seen before. Prior to us starting to advertise for the show, and as I said, there's new dialogue and some process art in it.
That's great. That's great. Definitely something new for people to look out for. Do you have any other projects on the go that you can talk about?
Speaking of Toronto comics, I'm in the next book, The City We Chose, I believe is the title. And this story I'm working on with Chris Lackey, is the writer. It's a hockey story, hometown hockey story in the vein of Essex County. So that, along with all the other stories from the next volume, I believe it's going to be out sometime for May or June. There's going to be a Kickstarter for it coming up shortly. And that will be the next book I have, hopefully for Fan Expo.
Sounds good. I've been meaning to ask you, what's your go-to tool for creating art these days? Have you switched anything up, or are you still on what you've been traditionally using?
So yeah, I'm still working off of my Cintiq using Photoshop, and I've I have been doing a bit more hybrid. The students I'm teaching, we're calling it strategized
Oh,
work. So
hmm.
basically, I will have some samples of that on my table, which is digital line pencil drawings that I've printed out in a blue line so that when I ink it, the blue doesn't really come through too much. So I have some traditional art on my table. It's Universal horror monsters in a sequential form. So I've been doing a little bit more of that recently. I'm not crazy about Photoshop in regards to what they're doing with AI. So I don't know if I'm going to. I've always been a little bit resistant to changing up my process, but because I've just been using Photoshop for so long. But it's kind of front and center of my mind a little bit more these days in regards to trying to stay away from anything that uses this AI tools. It's a
Yeah,
whole other conversation, I
it
guess.
is. It is. That's for sure. That's for sure. And
But
we'll table that for another time. But
yeah,
definitely, it's still in people's minds. And I'm glad to hear that you're considering that and reevaluating tools that you're using for the betterment, I guess, of the
mhm.
artistic end. I suppose. Anyway, we'll go down that rabbit hole another time. Now, you mentioned meeting a lot of younger folks who come up to your table. In fact, you've got workshops and this sort of thing going on. So with that in mind, you're going to get a lot of people coming to you at Toronto Comicon. What would be one piece of advice that you pass along to someone who says to you, I'm making my first comic book. What should I do?
Well, it's what I tell everybody. It's to doodle. To me, doodling is just a great way to get yourself loosened up for the day, to get your creative juices flowing, to get your eye-hand coordination going, to get ideas from your doodles. Doodling is great because everybody can do it. It doesn't require any particular type of medium. You can use a pencil, you can use a pen, whatever utensil you have handy that can leave a mark. And it's just, I think one of the big problems people have, and any age when they're trying to create comics or get back into art, is they get in their own way. And what I mean by that is they have a certain expectation of what they're going to create. And then when that expectation isn't fulfilled, it's heartbreaking sometimes. I know how that feels. I've gone through it many, many times myself. And oftentimes people go, well, it's not looking the way I want it to. I'm getting super frustrated. So I'm going to stop and maybe I'll do this again another time. And then they never pick up the pencil or whatever it is that they've been using. And they never create the comic book. And so I find that doodling is a great way for people to not worry about that first line that they're going to try to get down on whatever medium they're using, digital or traditional. Doodling allows for you just to warm up. And then hopefully, when you are starting to work on your comic book, you feel more confident and things are just working a bit better in regards to your eye hand coordination, your mind's eye, the visuals you have in your mind, ideas you may have, everything just kind of works a little bit easier. And therefore, if it's not working for you, you may go, you know what? I'm okay because I feel really good. I feel like I've accomplished something today. It just gets you in a really good headspace, I think. So doodling is what I recommend for anybody who wants to get into comic books.
That's good advice for sure. For sure. Now, with everything you've got on the go right now and the future, where should people go online to find out about everything you got going on?
I mainly show my work on Facebook and Instagram under my name, Keith Grachow. I do have a website, it's kgrachow.com, and I do update that with portfolio pieces. But if people want to know where I'm going to be next, if I have a new workshop or a book signing, or what kind of book I'm working on, if I'm showing process, or if I'm just, doodling, you can find more of that on Facebook and Instagram. Sometimes I post stuff on Threads.
Very good. Well, Keith, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Yeah, I do want to talk a bit about the workshops I've got coming up. So I actually have multiple workshops happening. I've got one series with Howard Wong at Wayside Comics and Cocktails, which is in Newmarket. And the first one, the date is going to be April 6th is the first one at Wayside. It's a 3-hour workshop. And if you want to learn how to write or draw or do both, you're going to have Howard and I giving you a hands-on approach for a 3-hour workshop. There's only going to be up to 8 people, so you're going to have our attention. And we're going to have more than one of those, but the first one is April 6th. And if you want to join it, it's $100 plus tax for each one. Then I also have a workshop series. I have 2 different ones for Hero's Tale, which is in Cambridge. The first one is a free one. It's a 2-hour workshop. And the first one I have for that is March 23rd, Saturday from 1 to 3. And that one's great for, essentially, we're just going to create a comic book, a single story comic book page. We just keep on repeating that workshop over and over. So some people have taken it before and wanted a more personal workshop from me. And so we are going to do a more advanced workshop there. And that first one is April 20th. And that one is the same price. It's $100 for the 3-hour workshop. And it's a similar information that the Wayside would, exception being Howard's not there. But I do write as well. So if you want writing or illustration or both, that's where you can get that kind of personalized information. And this class is going to be a bit smaller because our workshop's a bit smaller because it's just me. And it'll be up to 6 people for that one. Those are the workshops I've got going on. I will be also at Hero's Tales first anniversary, April 13th. And then I have the next thing after that, I've got the Artsy Fartsy Comicon, April 21st. Those are the next 2 events after the Toronto Comicon.
And for these workshops that you're putting on, can people sign up through your own website?
Yeah, so Wayside has a link as well as a QR code that you can use. Hero's Tale, if you go to the shop, there is one there. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask if he can post the actual poster I created on the Hero's Tale Facebook page so that people can just sign up through that.
Thanks to Keith for the chat. You can discover more about Keith on Instagram at instagram.com/Keith_Grachow. That's Grachow. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And remember to check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. True North Country Comics is on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Remember, you can follow along at True North Country Comics on most social media sites. And please send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2024.